Guests like you don't belong here. The words hit her like ice water, cutting through the hum of jazz and clinking glasses. Heads turned. Crystal flutes paused midair. The string quartet faltered as silence rippled through the lobby of the luxury Hotel Gala. She stood at the entrance, framed by the golden doors, her black satin gown catching the light. Her heels tapped softly on the marble, as if she'd stepped onto a stage she already owned. But the man blocking her path didn't see that. He stood there, in his crisp white jacket and bow tie, taller than her, smug, contempt curling on his lips. He ripped the invitation from her hand, scanned it once without really looking, then crumpled it in his fist. Clearly fake. Leave before I have security drag you out. Around her, whispers began to bloom like smoke. Who does she think she is? They always try to sneak in somewhere. Oh, this is going to be good. Phones rose into the air, lenses glinting, already recording. Waiting for her to crack. Waiting for her to turn away in shame. But she didn't. Her fingers tightened around her clutch. The leather pressed against her palm, grounding her. She could feel the old wounds there. Years of being overlooked, being doubted, being told she wasn't enough. Somewhere deep inside, a voice hissed, "Walk away. Prove them right." But another, sharper, more dangerous voice rose. "No. Stay. Make them regret this night." She took one calm breath, lifted her chin, and let her eyes lock on his with the kind of quiet fury that didn't need words. Then, she took one deliberate step forward. Gasps flared. A wine glass shattered somewhere in the back. Have you ever stood in a room where everyone doubted you, and thought about walking away, but didn't? Would you? Leave one word below if you've ever felt underestimated, because what happened next would turn the entire gala into chaos. He didn't move when she stepped forward. In fact, his hand shot up, palm out, as if she was some kind of threat that needed to be contained. His voice, louder this time, cracked through the hush. "You heard me. This is for invited guests only. You do not belong here." The crowd stirred, emboldened by his words. A few guests tittered nervously. Someone muttered, "This is ridiculous. She should know better." Another, her sharpest memory of that moment, laughed outright. She froze just beyond the threshold, her fingers still tight around her clutch, her heels planted in the marble floor. A dozen memories of nights like this clawed at her chest. The saleswoman who wouldn't let her try on the dress she wanted. The banker who assumed she couldn't possibly qualify for the loan. The board member who once told her, "You're good for the diversity optics, but don't get any big ideas." And now this. She didn't need their invitation. She owned this night already. But they didn't know that yet. Her breath came shallow, the sting of shame crawling up her neck. She felt it flush across her cheeks as the whispers grew louder. Two security guards began to approach from either side of the room. The clicking of their polished shoes on marble cut through her thoughts. Their hands already hovered near her arms, even though they hadn't touched her yet. She swallowed hard, her eyes fixed on the man in the white jacket. He leaned in just slightly and hissed low enough for only her to hear. "Do yourself a favor. Leave before you embarrass yourself further." Something in her snapped. Her gaze flicked to the guards closing in, then to the manager, then to the crowd of guests, some delighted, some shocked, all watching her humiliation unfold. Her mind was quiet now. No more arguments. No more doubt. Instead, something colder moved through her, something calculating. She straightened, smoothing the clutch in her hand, as though brushing dust from her dignity. And then she smiled. Not the kind of smile they expected. Not meek. Not ashamed. Not defeated. A dangerous, knowing smile that made even the guards hesitate for half a second. She tilted her head slightly and spoke for the first time that night. Her voice was soft, but every syllable cut clean through the noise. "You should be very careful about what you say next." The manager blinked, his expression faltering just enough to reveal doubt. The crowd gasped softly as if sensing the air had shifted. She didn't move again. Not yet. She just stood there, smiling, watching him sweat. And the guards stopped. Hovered. Unsure. Have you ever been in a moment where everyone expected you to crumble, and you chose not to? What would you have done? Drop your answer below. Because the next thing she did would shatter their illusion of control completely. The silence in the room grew heavy. For the first time, the man in the white jacket faltered. His eyes darted to the guards, as though seeking reassurance that he still controlled the moment. But even the guards hesitated, glancing at her, then at each other. Something about the way she stood there, calm, still, smiling faintly, sent an unspoken chill through them. She tilted her head, watching him squirm. Then, almost lazily, she set her clutch down on a nearby table. The sound of it landing, soft leather against marble, seemed louder than it should have been. Her hands free now, she reached into her gown's hidden pocket and drew out a phone. The manager's smirk twitched. He tried to sound confident, but his voice cracked just a little. "Ma'am, this isn't necessary. Please, we don't want a scene." She didn't even glance at him as she dialed. A soft beep-beep filled the tense air. Every pair of eyes followed her as she pressed the phone to her ear. Her nails gleamed under the chandelier light, catching everyone's attention. The line clicked, and she spoke just 4 words, "Clear the room." "Now." Gasp shot through the crowd. Some guests instinctively stepped back, clutching their pearls or their date's arms. A murmur rippled through the room. Who is she? What does she mean? Clear the room. Is she serious? The guards froze in place, waiting for guidance. But guidance wasn't coming from the manager anymore. His face had gone pale. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, his confidence collapsing in on itself. And then, her phone chimed again. A text message this time. She lifted it slowly, reading the reply. A corner of her mouth curved upward, just slightly. Then she raised her eyes to meet the manager's, and spoke again. Calm, precise, deadly. "You have 2 minutes to get everyone out of this room." A ripple of shock coursed through the crowd, louder now. Someone gasped audibly. Someone else let out a nervous laugh that quickly died in their throat. The manager blinked furiously, shaking his head. "Why, you can't just. This is a private." But he stopped when he saw the 2 men in dark suits enter through the back of the room. They didn't wear security badges. They didn't speak. They just stood there, waiting. The manager swallowed hard. His words shrank to a whisper. "Who are you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned her attention to the guests, who had already begun to gather their things and back away toward the doors. The whispers grew louder now. "I think she owns the hotel. Did you see the men in suits? They work for her. Oh my God. We're screwed." Even the string quartet quietly packed their instruments and slipped out the side. The 2 men in suits stepped forward, one to each side of her. She didn't even acknowledge them, didn't have to. The manager took a step back, colliding with a wine cart. Glasses rattled and one tipped over, red liquid blooming on the white tablecloth like blood. Have you ever seen the exact moment someone realizes they've underestimated you completely? Would you have said something? Or just let them sweat? Tell me below, what would you have done? Because what she said next would ignite the chaos they never saw coming. Before I tell you what happened when the room finally erupted, I know you might be busy. Maybe your boss just called, or you've got errands to run. Or maybe your mind can only handle so much drama at once. But if stories like this fascinate you, hit subscribe now. You don't want to miss how this all unfolds. Now, where were we? Ah, yes. The room. It started small, just a few people edging toward the exit, whispering frantically to each other, glancing back over their shoulders at her. Then one woman's heel caught the corner of a rug, and she stumbled, yelping, which set off a ripple of movement through the entire crowd. A man in a tuxedo cursed under his breath as he dropped his champagne, the crystal shattering at his feet. Another woman clutched her pearls and hissed, "Move. Let me through." And just like that, the room was chaos. Guests jostled and bumped one another as they scrambled for the doors. The sharp scent of spilled wine mixed with expensive perfume. A chair clattered to the floor. Someone knocked over a candelabra, and flames briefly flared before being smothered by a waiter's cloth. The string quartet was long gone now, their music stands left abandoned in the corner. And she hadn't moved an inch. Standing in the center of it all, flanked by the 2 silent men in dark suits, she watched with that same faint, cold smile as panic spread like wildfire. Her eyes swept the crowd, noting how quickly the confident chatter of an hour ago had dissolved into desperate whispers and frightened stares. It always happened like this. First they laugh at you, then they fear you. And this was the moment she waited for. The manager, still rooted in place near the wine cart, was white as a sheet. His hands trembled at his sides, fingers clenching and unclenching as though he might faint at any second. He finally croaked out a weak plea. Please, just tell me what you want." Her head tilted slightly, as though she were studying him under a microscope. Then she took a single, deliberate step closer. "I already told you." she said softly, but loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. Clear the room. The guards leapt into action then. Her guards, not his. They moved with silent precision, ushering the last stubborn guests toward the doors, collecting dropped bags and coats, even straightening toppled chairs as they passed. It was like watching a well-rehearsed play unfold. Within 90 seconds, the grand ballroom was nearly empty. Only the manager, two servers frozen in place behind the dessert table, and the faint smell of fear remained. Have you ever stood in a place where everyone around you finally saw you, truly saw you, and it terrified them? Would you have enjoyed it, or pitied them? Tell me in one word below: power or mercy? Because what she did next proved just how far she was willing to go to reclaim her throne. The echo of the last set of footsteps faded into silence. The grand ballroom, moments ago filled with chatter, laughter, and clinking glasses, now stood empty except for her and him. The manager's bow tie had come loose, hanging lopsided as beads of sweat gathered on his temples. His knuckles whitened where he gripped the edge of the wine cart, like it was the only thing holding him upright. She stood across from him, her heels clicking once as she took another step closer, the sound sharp and deliberate. Her two men remained by the door, watching quietly. They didn't need to move. Everyone in the room knew who was in control now. The manager swallowed hard, his voice cracking when he finally spoke. I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know who you were. She raised an eyebrow, studying him as though his words were nothing but background noise. Then she reached for a bottle of wine from the cart, a 2006 Chateau Margaux, and held it up to the light. The deep red shimmered in the glass as she turned it in her hand. For a moment, he thought she might strike him with it. Instead, she set it down on the cart with a soft clink. Then she leaned in slightly, her voice low, her words slicing through the thick air. That's the problem. People like you never bother to know who I am. You just assume. His breath hitched, his eyes darting to the guards as if silently begging for help. But no help came. She straightened and glanced around the empty room, her gaze cold and unflinching. Then, as though speaking to no one in particular, she continued. How many others have you humiliated in this room? How many more before someone finally stopped you? The manager stammered, shaking his head, trying to find words, but nothing came out. She let the silence hang just long enough to suffocate him. And then she smiled. Not kindly, not forgivingly. A smile that sent a chill straight through him. Her hand came up, and she snapped her fingers once. The two men moved forward. One gently but firmly took the manager by the arm. He resisted for half a second before the other leaned in and whispered something into his ear. Whatever it was made him go pale as parchment. Without another word, they escorted him out of the room, his shoes squeaking against the marble as he stumbled over himself. She didn't watch him leave. Instead, she picked up the bottle of wine again, uncorked it with a single, practiced motion, and poured herself a glass. The faintest smile still lingered as she brought the glass to her lips. Have you ever had the chance to turn the tables on someone who humiliated you? Would you have shown mercy, or made them pay? Tell me honestly below, what would you have done? Because even as the doors closed behind him, her phone buzzed again. She set her glass down slowly, picked up the phone, and read the message. Her eyes narrowed, the faint smile fading into something harder. Whatever she read was worse than anything that had happened tonight. And what she did next would make tonight's chaos look like nothing. The room was empty now, except for her. The faint aroma of wine hung in the air. The last drops from her glass clung to the crystal as she set it back on the cart with a soft clink. But her eyes weren't on the wine anymore. They were on her phone. She stared at the message glowing on the screen, her jaw tightening as she read it again. Then again. It was just one sentence. But it was enough to stop her heart for a beat. The board has already moved against you. Her fingers tightened around the phone until the edges dug into her skin. So this wasn't just about tonight. Her gaze drifted toward the grand doors, where the manager had been dragged out moments ago. Pieces of the puzzle started to click into place. His arrogance, the fake list of guests, the orchestrated humiliation in front of all those people. This was never an accident. They wanted her to snap, to make a scene, to look like she didn't belong. And they almost got what they wanted. Almost. She inhaled slowly, closing her eyes for a second, centering herself. When she opened them again, her reflection glared back at her in the gleaming marble floor. A woman in black satin and diamonds, standing alone at the center of a battlefield she hadn't even realized she was fighting. Not yet. She tapped the phone and began typing, her thumbs moving fast, precise. Her voice was low, quiet, but it carried in the stillness of the room as she spoke each word aloud while she typed. Assemble everyone. Tonight. At the office. Clear schedules. She hit send. Somewhere deep inside, a strange calm settled over her. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was war. Her heels echoed as she strode toward the exit, her two guards falling into step behind her. One of them finally broke the silence. What do you want us to do about the gala, ma'am? She didn't slow down, her voice as sharp as glass. Shut it down. Permanently. The guards exchanged a look. One of them gave a faint smirk. When she reached the lobby, she stopped for just a moment at the threshold, letting her eyes sweep over the glittering room one last time. It was almost poetic, how quickly it had all fallen apart when she decided to stand her ground. She pressed a button on her phone, and the soft buzz of a line connecting hummed in her ear. A woman's voice answered almost immediately. Yes, ma'am. Her lips curled just slightly. Start the audit. Every department. Every name. Every account. I want to know who signed off on tonight. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Understood. She ended the call, slipping her phone back into her clutch as she stepped out into the cool night air. The street outside was quiet, the faint sound of traffic in the distance, the smell of rain lingering on the pavement. She stood there for a moment, breathing it in. Calm, cold, focused. Have you ever discovered that the insult wasn't just about you, but part of something bigger? If you were her, would you fight back or walk away? Type one word in the comments. Fight or leave. Because what she uncovered next would shake the entire company to its core. The elevator doors closed behind her with a soft ding. Inside, she stood still, her reflection fractured into sharp angles by the polished metal walls. Her fingers drummed lightly on the clutch at her side. The two guards flanked her silently, both stiff, professional, but even they glanced at each other uneasily now and then, as if they could feel what was coming. At the top floor, the doors slid open into the private office suite. The lights were already on. Her team had arrived ahead of her. They all stood as she entered, assistants, department heads, her chief of operations. Nobody spoke. The room was thick with tension, as though everyone already sensed that tonight's humiliation was only the surface of something far darker. She set her clutch down on the conference table and removed her coat in one smooth motion. Her black gown caught the light, her diamond earrings flashing like tiny blades. Then she turned to face them all. Her eyes swept the room. Not one person dared meet her gaze. She let the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Finally, she spoke. Her tone was quiet, measured, the kind of quiet that makes people hold their breath. The board thought tonight would break me. They planned it. The COO shifted in his seat, clearing his throat as if to protest, but her hand shot up. A subtle, sharp command, and he froze. She tapped her phone on the table, and the screen lit up with an email chain projected on the wall behind her. Subject line, contingency plan, removing her from power. Gasps rose around the room. One assistant put her hand to her mouth. Someone whispered. They set her up? Her eyes hardened. They knew I'd be at that gala. They fed the manager false orders to deny me entry. They paid off staff to record my reaction. Tonight was supposed to be my undoing. Public, humiliating, permanent. She stepped closer to the table. But they underestimated one thing. Me. Her fingers scrolled to the bottom of the email chain. A name stood out in bold. Everyone leaned in. Then they saw it. Marcus Delane, chairman of the board. A murmur rippled through the room. Her COO's face went pale. Marcus orchestrated this. She didn't answer him. She didn't have to. Instead, she turned to the window, gazing down at the city below, its streets glittering in the dark like veins of light. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper now. Tomorrow morning, we start dismantling him. Quietly. Completely. Then she pivoted back to face them, her presence filling the room like a storm. I want every account, every vote, every ally he thinks he has, gone by sunrise. Do you understand? They nodded, one by one, their faces pale, their eyes wide. Even now, some of them wondered, was she ruthless enough to really do it? But one look at her face gave them their answer. Have you ever discovered the name of the person who betrayed you, and felt your whole body go cold? Would you confront them head-on, or destroy them from the shadows? Write one word below, confront, or destroy. Because what she did next would show Marcus just how deadly underestimating her could be. The clock on the wall ticked softly. It was just past 3 a.m., yet the office was alive. Lights blazing, keyboards clattering, quiet footsteps moving in and out of her private suite. She sat at the head of the long conference table now, her black gown replaced with a sleek tailored suit, hair pulled back tight, a single diamond pin glinting at her collar. The air was colder now, as though her presence alone had dropped the temperature by degrees. Around her, department heads took turns placing stacks of reports in front of her. Names, numbers, connections. She reviewed each one with clinical precision, her eyes scanning for weaknesses, her mind already calculating which pieces to pull first. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, calm, the kind of calm that made people nervous. Start with the CFO? He's Marcus's right hand. Strip him of voting shares by noon. Freeze his expense accounts. Leak the Cayman documents to the press by morning. Her COO hesitated for a split second. That could ruin him completely. Her eyes flicked to him, and he fell silent. That's the idea. She signed the order without another word. Her assistants moved quickly, sweeping up the papers, relaying instructions down the chain. One by one, she dismantled Marcus's network like a master chess player knocking pawns off the board. The head of PR? She unearthed the buried scandal that had kept him in line all these years, and sent it anonymously to a rival outlet. The director of legal? His hush money payments to a former employee just hit the compliance inbox. The VP of operations? Frozen out of every major meeting effective immediately. It was surgical, ruthless, impeccable. By 4:15, the COO's phone buzzed with an alert. He glanced at it, and then at her, his face pale. Marcus is calling for an emergency board meeting in 2 hours. She didn't even look up from the report she was signing. Good. The COO hesitated, then dared to ask, what exactly do you plan to do in that meeting? She set her pen down slowly, meeting his gaze. The faintest smile curved her lips, sharp and cold. Remind him whose name is on the building. The room fell quiet again. Somewhere outside, the city began to stir, the first hint of dawn breaking through the glass. But here, under her command, the darkness still ruled. Have you ever found yourself holding all the cards after someone tried to destroy you? Would you play them, or burn the whole deck just to watch them squirm? Drop one word in the comments, play or burn. Because what she said to Marcus at that meeting left even her closest allies breathless. The boardroom was already full when she arrived. Marcus sat at the head of the table, his tailored navy suit impeccable, his gold cufflinks catching the light as he steepled his fingers in front of him. Around him sat the remaining board members, some whispering, some staring down at their phones, but all visibly uneasy. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the air conditioning and the low murmur of nervous conversation. That hum stopped the moment she walked in. Her heels clicked against the polished floor as she entered, flanked by her two silent guards. She didn't glance at anyone, didn't acknowledge Marcus, didn't bother to sit. She simply set her clutch on the table and straightened, her eyes sweeping the room with quiet authority. Marcus forced a polite smile, though the corners of his mouth trembled slightly. Thank you for coming at such short notice. She said nothing. The COO, seated halfway down the table, cleared his throat nervously. Papers rustled. Chairs shifted. Marcus gestured toward an empty seat near the end. Please, won't you join us? Her eyes finally moved, landing squarely on him. And for the first time, Marcus faltered. She didn't take the seat. Instead, she slowly removed her jacket, revealing a sleek black blouse beneath, and draped the jacket neatly over the back of a chair. Then she stepped forward, planting both palms flat on the gleaming table. The entire room seemed to lean back instinctively. Her voice was low, quiet, but it cut through the silence like a blade. This is still my company. Marcus's smile twitched, faltered, then disappeared completely. He opened his mouth to respond, but she raised one hand slightly, a small, effortless gesture, and he stopped cold. Then she spoke again, each word deliberate. You thought tonight would finish me. You thought humiliation would make me step aside. You thought wrong. A murmur rippled around the table, but no one dared to interrupt. She straightened, producing her phone and laying it face up on the table. One tap, and the screen projected an email chain to the large display on the wall. the same damning thread she'd revealed to her team hours earlier. Marcus's name glowed in bold at the bottom. A sharp intake of breath swept through the room. One board member muttered under his breath, "Oh my God." Marcus's face drained of color, his hands tightening into fists on the table. "That's out of context," he started, but his voice cracked. She ignored him, turning instead to the others. "You all signed these documents. You all agreed to this plan. And now, you'll pay for it." Her gaze was ice. "You have one chance. Resign your seats. Tonight. Or I take everything. Your titles, your reputations, your homes. Everything." One by one, the board members lowered their eyes. One by one, they nodded. Only Marcus remained silent, his jaw clenched so tight it looked as though it might shatter. She turned back to him, her expression unreadable. And then, finally, she smiled. Not cruel, not triumphant. Inevitable. "You first." Marcus's pen clattered against the table as he finally reached for the resignation form. Have you ever stood face to face with someone who tried to destroy you, and watched them break instead? Would you let them walk away, or finish what they started? Comment one word below, walk, or finish. Because what she said to Marcus before he left was the most devastating part of all. The sound of the pen scratching across paper was the loudest thing in the room. Marcus's signature trailed off into a shaky line at the bottom of the resignation form. His hand trembled as he set the pen down. The faint metallic clink it made on the table seemed deafening in the silence. Nobody moved. The board members kept their eyes lowered, as if afraid even to breathe too loudly. The air in the room was thick, oppressive, as though everyone present could feel the shift in power settling over them like a storm cloud. She stood motionless at the head of the table, one hand resting lightly on the polished wood, her eyes fixed on Marcus with quiet intensity. He pushed the paper toward her, his face ashen, his lips pressed into a thin, bitter line. She didn't reach for it immediately. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, closing the space between them, her voice low, almost intimate, yet sharp enough to cut. "Look at me." Marcus hesitated, then lifted his eyes to meet hers. What he saw there made him flinch. Not anger, not even triumph. Something colder. Something he couldn't name. She held his gaze for a long, suffocating beat. Then she spoke, just loud enough for him to hear, though everyone else in the room strained to catch her words. "You didn't just lose your seat tonight, Marcus. You lost the only thing that kept you relevant. When you walk out of here, no one will remember your name." His breath hitched, his composure cracking at last. Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "But they'll remember mine." Marcus blinked, and she could see it, the moment it sank in. The moment he realized this was more than defeat. It was erasure. Without another word, she reached down, picked up the form, and tucked it neatly into her folder. Then she straightened, smoothing her jacket as though nothing at all had happened. The guard stepped forward to escort Marcus out. As he rose, unsteady, his knees threatening to buckle, she tilted her head ever so slightly and murmured one final blow. "Just for him. Thank you for showing me who my enemies are. You've done more for me tonight than you ever did as my chairman." Marcus's face crumpled as he turned, shuffling toward the door under the weight of her words. The room stayed silent long after the doors closed behind him. Only then did she allow her eyes to sweep over the board, her presence filling every corner of the space. One by one, the remaining members straightened their backs and nodded, acknowledging what they all knew now. The room, the company, belonged to her. No one else dared to speak. Have you ever stood over someone who tried to bury you, and felt nothing at all as you walked away? Would you show them pity, or let them drown in what they created? Drop just one word below, pity or drown. Because as she turned to leave, she realized Marcus wasn't the only one plotting against her. And what she uncovered next was even more dangerous. The boardroom was empty now. The faint scent of leather chairs and spilled coffee lingered as the door closed behind the last of them. She stood alone at the head of the table, the folder with Marcus's resignation tucked under her arm. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished wood, composed, unflinching, victorious. But she knew better. She turned, walking slowly toward the window wall, where the first pale rays of dawn lit the skyline in gold and ash. Below her, the city pulsed and glimmered, oblivious to the quiet war she'd just fought and won. Her phone buzzed softly in her hand. She raised it, expecting a message from her COO confirming Marcus's exit had been clean. But it wasn't from her COO. It was from an unknown number. And it was just one line. You removed the wrong enemy. Her fingers stilled. Her chest tightened as she read it again, then again. A chill ran down her spine. She tapped to reveal the attached file. A document opened, full of names, dates, transactions, and at the bottom, a signature she never expected to see. Her stomach dropped. It wasn't Marcus. Not entirely. There was someone else, someone higher, smarter, and far more dangerous, who'd been pulling strings all along. The faintest flicker of fury crossed her face, quickly smothered beneath a calm, icy mask. Her guards were waiting just outside the door when she stepped into the hallway. They straightened as she approached, sensing her shift in energy. Call the office, she said, her voice quiet but sharp. Wake legal, wake security, wake everyone. And find out who bought those shares last quarter. One of the guards nodded, pulling out his phone. She kept walking, her heels striking the marble like the steady tick of a clock. Her mind raced, but her expression never wavered. So Marcus was just a pawn, and the real player was still hiding, watching, waiting for her to think she'd won before striking the final blow. But she wouldn't give them that chance. Not this time. Have you ever thought you won? Only to realize someone else was 3 moves ahead. Would you retreat, or double down? Comment one word below, retreat, or double. Because what she uncovered by the end of that day would change everything she thought she knew about her company. And herself, by nightfall, the trap was set. She stood once more in the boardroom, this time by design. Every detail was intentional. The room was lit only by the warm glow of recessed lights. A single chair waited at the far end of the table, and she waited at the head, her black suit crisp, her diamond pin catching the light like a blade. The door opened. Her COO entered first, eyes nervous. Behind him came the guest she'd been expecting all day. Her general counsel. The woman who had sat at her side for years. The one who had whispered strategy into her ear, who had always seemed too loyal, too competent. The one whose name she'd seen at the bottom of that file. For a moment, the room was silent. The general counsel glanced around at the empty chairs, then forced a polite smile. You wanted to see me? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she tapped her fingers lightly on the folder in front of her, the same folder that now held the proof of everything. Secret meetings with competitors, illicit sale of board shares, her fingerprints on Marcus's plan from the very beginning. The woman shifted under her gaze. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm, cold, and final. Sit. The woman hesitated, then obeyed. She opened the folder slowly, turning it so the woman could see. Page after page of damning evidence fanned out across the table. The woman's face went pale. She started. But the CEO raised her hand, and silence fell again. You almost had me. Her tone was measured, but deadly. You were smart. Smarter than Marcus. Smarter than all of them. But you made one mistake. The woman swallowed hard. What mistake? Her lips curved into the faintest smile. You underestimated me. Then she leaned back slightly, her eyes glinting with quiet satisfaction. You're done here. You'll resign. Tonight. And tomorrow morning, every firm in this city will know why. The woman's breath hitched. You can't. She cut her off with a soft laugh. I already have. The general counsel's shoulders slumped as the weight of it finally sank in. She slowly reached for the pen lying on the table and signed her resignation. The CEO watched in silence, then gathered the papers, stacking them neatly into her folder. As the woman stood to leave, the CEO's voice stopped her at the door. One more thing. The woman turned, her face a mask of defeat. The CEO's gaze was icy, her words quiet but sharp enough to leave scars. Next time you want to take what I built, you'd better be ready to burn with it. The woman lowered her eyes and slipped out of the room. And just like that, it was over. She stood alone again, the city lights glowing beyond the glass wall. She'd kept her company. She'd crushed her enemies. She'd reminded them all who she was, and why they'd never forget her name. Have you ever taken back what was stolen from you, and made them regret even trying? Would you have let her walk away, or destroyed her completely? Tell me one word below, forgive or destroy. Because one thing was certain now, she didn't just reclaim her throne. She made sure no one would ever dare challenge her again.